So looking back on Sunday, it was absolutely amazing. Now we gathered once again at Rip Beer Company and we were hanging out. Our usual crew was there. We were strong once again. I appreciate everybody. And I appreciate everybody who's been coming out for the entirety of the season. We've had nothing but great crowds. It's only going to get bigger. We're going to start doing shows from there. Eventually we're going to have our draft party there. So there's a lot of exciting things going on, but Sunday, of course, we're watching the Bears game. It goes the way it goes. And we all I'm not going to rehash it. Things are going on. It's like what you would expect. Like, okay, we saw our guy Velus Jones Jr. go out there and get a touchdown, which we absolutely loved. Could not have asked for anything more. Really, pretty much what you wanted was like, hey, can Velus go score a touchdown? And then that's it. Let's just call it. Like, okay, guys, you win. You win Minnesota. I look at that, and then at some point we switched the main TV to the Houston Texans, and we were out there cheering like we had just won. Like we had won a game. We were cheering for the Texans, much like you would have cheered for the Chicago Bears. It was crazy. It was pandemonium. There were some folks who were walking up to Rip Beer Company, including my fam, who was walking up like, what happened? I'm like, oh, the Bears just scored the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And then to cap that off, Sunday night. And I got to admit, I'm a little jealous of the Lions. The Lions had this season, I kind of hope the Bears had, where 9 wins, challenging for the playoffs, and ending the season of the Green Bay Packers. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm a little bit jealous that Detroit had that opportunity to do that, but at the same time, Detroit deserves something nice. They had their moment in the sun. We're gonna be on Hard Knocks next year. Everybody's gonna fall in love with Matt Eberflus and this team, and it'll be fine. And you know what? I'm just ready to go. There's so much to talk about. So, Sammy, why don't we just go ahead and start the show?
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Tuesday night. You know what that means. It is time for Take It to the Rank. And in case you were wondering, Take It to the Rank is going to continue on through the offseason, perhaps the most important offseason in the entirety of the Chicago Bears franchise. It has been so long since this team has had a franchise quarterback, somebody to build around. And listen, it's never happened in the Super Bowl era. The Chicago Bears have the number 1 overall draft pick. And of course, here to break it down with us is our co-host for Take It to the Rank, Carmen Vitali. And she's everywhere these days. I don't even know where to start with, like Fox Sports, CHGO. I don't know if you do Take It to the tape never lie. I don't know, but how are you, Carmen?
I'm great. Thank you. I missed you. I missed you guys.
I missed you. Of course, the circumstances last week, we felt it was in our best. Just as human beings, just to not go out there and talk about everything what happened. But great news with Damar Hamlin, his progress, and we're excited to see him and how well he's doing. And we're excited to be here, though, to talk about the Chicago Bears and what is. I don't think I'm overstating it by saying this is the most important offseason probably ever.
I mean, it would have to be. When is the last time a team, period, had this many resources at their disposal between draft picks, draft capital, and also cap space? I mean, these guys are by far and away have the most cap space in the league. And we listened to Ryan Poles today say that doesn't mean that they're going to go on a crazy spending spree. They're going to be sound and very well thought out in how they spend their money. But it affords them flexibility that I don't know the last time a team had this much flexibility, quite honestly.
No, I mean, honestly, though, the team that kind of comes to mind is Jacksonville with what they were able to do last year. And it's funny because some idiot because I tweeted out my thing about, hey, look, the Bears have everything you just talked about, Justin Fields, cap space, draft capital. Like it's a perfect storm. And this idiot's just like, the teams didn't go from the number 1 overall pick to the playoffs. And I'm like, it literally happened 4 minutes ago. 4 minutes ago, Jacksonville just won a football game that sent them to the playoffs. Like, I don't know. I like it. I like the position that we're in. I am not going to enjoy the 3 months of are the Bears trading away Justin Fields. And if I'm not mistaken, were you not just on a show where you were contemplating getting rid of Justin? Am I mistaken? It
was. First of all, we very much acknowledge the fact that wasn't going to happen. But it was just a kind of a thought exercise. And honestly, you had Ryan Poles today who didn't commit to Justin Fields. And I think that I have a whole thing. I've been thinking about it all day, to be quite honest, like what his comments meant, what they didn't, what the things he didn't say.
Okay. We actually have some of his comments queued up. If we can play the first sound bite, let's take a listen to that right now. Here's what Ryan Poles had to say about Justin Fields.
Good conversations. I'm excited for the direction he's going. And as I mentioned before, he knows where he has to improve. I think you mentioned that the other day. So we're excited about his development and where he goes next. He showed ability to be impactful with his legs. There's flashes with his arm. Now, if we can put that together, I think we have something really good.
Because you have the first pick, there are people that sit there and go, the quarterback might be available there. You're saying Justin's your guy.
Well, we're going to do the same as we've always done. We're going to evaluate the draft class. And I would say this, I'd have to be absolutely blown away to make that type of decision.
All right. Is that what's been rattling you all day?
As is so often with these things, you have to kind of look at these comments and see who stands to gain from, he didn't come right out and say, yeah, Justin's our guy. We're going to build around him. It's going to be better next year, yada, yada, yada. But there is really no incentive to do that at this point in the game, especially with how mum this staff already is. I mean, Matt Eberflus, when it comes to injuries, he might as well be a hockey coach because it's upper body, lower body. That's it.
That's true.
So there's no reason to do that. But you look at these comments and the Bears still stand to gain from Ryan Poles not ruling out the possibility of being blown away by CJ Stroud or
Bryce Young.
Like Jalen Hurts. I've been talking about a lot of Alabama and other quarterbacks. Anyway, so you look at these two guys, right? And you look at the draft order as it is, because that's set right now, right? So you look at the Bears at the top. They are seemingly not a quarterback needy team. You look at the Houston Texans, do need a quarterback. The Cardinals, maybe you need a quarterback, but you already paid Kyler Murray, and he's the most consistent thing about your franchise, that you can't take a quarterback. And then you got the Colts, who will probably take a quarterback. So two of the top four teams, quarterback needy. And then you look at the guys that are available, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. They're kind of in their own tier, and then you got like Will Levis on down, right? And you have to look at those guys, and if you think that Bryce Young is like your guy, and he is by far and away, there's a big gap between him and CJ Stroud still, and you love Bryce Young, then you've got no choice but to trade up with the Bears to get that number one pick and jump Houston. Fine. But let's say you were kind of swayed like I was in that semifinal game, and I think CJ Stroud made himself a lot of money, and that maybe those two are interchangeable. And now you're like, all right, well, whichever one Houston doesn't pick, we're fine with. So now all you have to do is jump the Colts, and that leaves you with the third overall pick with the Cardinals. And that, they're not going to take a quarterback. They're not going to take any convincing. They're more than happy to trade down. So then that's also a much cheaper pick to get than the first overall pick. I know it's only 2 picks difference, but there's a significant amount of difference in between those 2 picks. So now Arizona's going to reap the benefits of a trade down, and the Bears are going to be stuck, without it. But now, if you haven't ruled out that you might take a quarterback, which is what Ryan Poles didn't do, right, I have a sneaking suspicion that Ryan Poles is out here playing chess, and I appreciate it, because now you're introducing the possibility that those 2 quarterbacks go 1 and 2. And not only, if you want one of those guys, are you going to have to trade up ahead of Houston, but now you're going to have to convince the Bears that they don't want a quarterback. That they're not blown away by CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, which might come with some extra picks. It might come with some extra capital. It's going to drive the price up for the Bears moving out of that spot. So I think, I'm not trying to put words in Ryan Poles' mouth. I'm not trying to put thoughts in his head, but this is kind of the game you play all offseason, is like, well, we might take a quarterback. And for all we know, he's behind the scenes telling Justin, hey, listen, no, you're our guy. But if you can stand 2 months of media speculation about if you are our guy, I promise to get you the biggest haul we possibly can, surround you with the most pieces we possibly can. And all it's going to cost you is a couple months of maybe turn your phone off while you're on the beach in Cabo. And Justin's a team player. He's going to take one for the team. So I don't know. I really appreciate it. He's not going to show his hand, but I also think that he's planting the seeds to kind of get this rumor snowballing that maybe the Bears will take a quarterback, because that's only going to drive the price up.
No, I agree. And I do believe that, for me, I still think that Bryce Young is ahead of CJ Stroud. And the good news is that you have two division rivals who are competing for that. So if the Colts end up convincing themselves like, I need this guy, this is the player that I need, because, you also have to understand teams like the Raiders are going to be in the mix for the quarterback as well. And there's some other teams. Yeah, maybe the Seahawks. I know that everybody's just assuming. I think the Seahawks have played it pretty well too, where they're like, oh no, we're taking a defensive player. You've seen that in a lot of the mocks, and I'm like, what? Like I know that Geno played very well, and he was the QB5 in fantasy, but you cannot tell me when you're going into the playoffs right now, and I know that Pete Carroll loves to stress the defense and everything like that. If they could go out there and get the opportunity to get a guy who's going to be on a rookie contract for 5 years, which is what they did with Russell Wilson, while they continue to build the defense, I think that they're also in the mix as well. So I think there's a lot of people who are still sort of in there. So it should hopefully be beneficial. The dream for me, I know you were talking about your thought exercises. Instead of like trying to trade Justin Fields, maybe you can do Wordle instead. Have that be your thought exercise. But the dream for me, I'll just put it out there, is that they trade down to 2, and then they have to trade. Then they trade to 4, so that they swap with Houston, and then Indianapolis gets worried that the Raiders are going to move up, and then they swap with Indianapolis, land in the top 4, trade down twice. I know it's never happened. I don't think it's happened that close where a team's remained in the top 5 after moving down a couple of picks. Even if you move down to 7 where the Raiders are, whatever it is, I'm happy to do it. I hope that there's multiple picks being done. And I honestly agreed with a lot of, or all of what Ryan Poles was saying. I do like that they acknowledge, obviously he can run the football.
Yeah.
You're ridiculous if you don't acknowledge that. And I still think that you can be like, I would like to see better. Like he could improve as a passer. I think it's a fair assessment. I don't think that's
more than fair.
Yeah, it's not damaging him. Yeah. I thought that a lot of his footwork, his field vision and all that stuff impressed me towards the end of the season. And I know last week when we did the podcast, I said that he had nothing left to prove. And a lot of people took that as me saying that he was an all-pro, but I meant like in the terms of this season, he had nothing. Like there was not like, I need to see one more game out of him. Like you did, like you either thought he was a good quarterback or you don't. Like you think you know what I'm saying? Like, he doesn't, that one game wasn't going to matter to him. So I felt that everything that Ryan Poles said was fair. I think it's fine. Yeah. Let people think you're crazy. They don't know. Like make Mark Davis think you're crazy and send us Devontae Adams. Who knows what he is. He also had some other things to add about Justin Fields. Sammy, if we could play that clip as well. And let's dive into this one.
The passer, just for things to slow down mentally and then be able to react and anticipate quicker. Obviously with that, we also have to continue to build around him so that he can do that consistently as well.
What did you learn about him, just watching him kind of develop as that leader of this offense?
Yeah, resilient. A guy that has ownership, he has growth mindset. The amount of time that he put in with the coaches to continue to get better, the guy is hungry to be successful.
Yeah, it feels to me like when you talk about it, we can say, oh, we want to see some improvements as a passer. I think mentally, that is the strongest Bears quarterback that I've seen maybe since McMahon and I was a little kid. But I think mentally I love his makeup and I love his mindset. And I think that he's got that it factor.
Yeah, he's got the intangibles that you need out of a quarterback, out of a leader, out of a guy that needs to be at the forefront of keeping this locker room, especially through adversity through this season. That was another thing that Ryan Poles said, and he attributed a lot of that to Matt Eberflus, keeping the locker room together, making sure guys aren't turning on each other, even though they're losing games. But I also think it's a testament to Justin Fields because through everything he fought through, he fought to play every single game till the very end. And I agree with you in that last game wasn't going to do anything, especially not because I would have wanted to still see more out of Justin, but he wasn't going to be able to accomplish that on the field with the people that were around him. The line is banged up, was still shuffling. He's got no more receivers. There was no quality development that was happening at that point in the season. I thought they should have sat him for the last 2 games. Yeah. But that's not the type of guy Justin is. And I think that that's a huge testament to those intangibles of being like, no, I'm going to be out there fighting with these guys because these are my guys. And that is exactly what you want out of a quarterback. And I think that there are no questions about his leadership, just like there's no questions about what he can do with his legs and in the run game. There's no questions about his leadership either. I think everybody is in complete agreement that he has what it takes to lead a team. It's just, again, what can he do in the pass game? We saw what he could do in college. Why hasn't that translated to the NFL? It's because of X, Y, and Z. That needs to get better. That makes sense.
I can kind of explain why that hasn't quite happened in the NFL, and it's Chris Olave, Jamison Williams. I don't know. We could go on and on. Garrett Wilson, So there's a lot of things but again, like that offensive line looked, it looked pretty banged up. And our guy Dieter got in a little bit too. And, I'll go on to the Tape Never Lies tomorrow night. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And to talk about the evaluation of the line, when I'm listening to Ryan Poles in that second clip, to me, it sounds like the offensive line just needs to be better. And it's just something that they have to do. How many starters do you think that we needed? We had the Bears Nerd on Friday, and some people can say it's anywhere between I think 5 is too many. Some say 4. I think 3. How many offensive linemen do you think that we need?
How many do we need? So yeah, okay. I think if you're like 2 and 3. Yeah, there's 2 and 3 guys that could possibly start for you next year that are on this line already. So I think you need between 2 and 3 guys starters. You need between 2 and 3 starters. Ryan Poles did call out Riley Reif by name because he said that Riley did a lot more than what people realize just from terms of talking these guys up and a leadership aspect. Mm-hmm. He can obviously speak to a lot more given his experience with multiple teams in the league. But I don't think that, I think in the same breath, Ryan Poles talked about guys, being depth. And even if they're depth, it means that they have all this experience already in game, and then they can add ahead of them. And that's kind of what I'm looking for out of this draft. That's what I've been saying, in that the Bears can add from the top down now with all of the capital they have across all platforms. You're going to have depth inherently if you hang on to some of these guys, and guys that have been quality depth, that have been in game action because of what this season was. And that's really, really good, because then you can add these starters, but then if these starters go down, then you have guys that have game experience behind them. And that's not what every team gets. I mean, there's not a lot of teams even in the division that have that. So the foundation is being laid. That was the overarching, message of Ryan Poles' whole spiel today. And I trust him implicitly when it comes to evaluating offensive line talent. And if we traded down, the Bears traded down.
Oh, it's
gold habits die hard, guys. I promise. I was a Bears fan growing up. If they traded down and got Peter Skoronski, I would be a very happy camper. I don't know if you can tell. I've got my Northwestern ornament up there next to a Bears football. So y'all can stop talking to me about not having anything Bears in my background.
No. Who says that? Everybody
I get so many people that are like, Carmen doesn't have anything in her Bears, whatever. And I'm like, all right. I even have. This is actually one of the best things I own. It was my dad's from the 80s. It's a Walter Payton Scotch glass, and it has Walter Payton's league records listed on it.
Oh my God, that's amazing!
It's so cool. It's so old. It's old, but it's amazing, and it's the best thing I own. So
that's what
it's on my little bar cart now.
We love stuff like that. As we get deeper into the offseason, we'll start doing what's in your background, because I know I get questions all the time, like, who are these bobbleheads? What's this? What's his hat?
Yeah, yours is much more interesting than mine is.
We will we'll take some time during the off season to kind of go through that. But right now there's so many things, so many cool things going on. Like, there was just so much to digest on Tuesday, because there is so much to go into. But I want to stick here with the offensive line. Braxton Jones, to me, I think I think he's a keeper. Matt Cartensen, the Bears nerd who was on last week, we're talking about his athleticism. Like, the Bears really showcased his athleticism. So that's pretty good. He also mentioned, though, that Tevin Jenkins, does he still have a desire? You might have some insight into this. Does he still want to be a tackle? Is there a possibility that he could be a right tackle, or does it look like he's locked in at right guard?
No, I mean, he talked about it. What was that, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? About how he wants to do wherever he fits in. And he has found a home at right guard. And if that's where the Bears want, I think he is like your lock at this point as to who is going to start from this team next year. And he might be the only like 100% lock that I feel confident is going to be a starter next year. I think Braxton Jones absolutely has the potential, and he's going to be given every chance to succeed, given the fact that Ryan Poles drafted him and, kind of found a diamond in the rough with him. Ryan Poles did say that he wants him to work on his body a lot in the offseason. He will have a full offseason to do so. That's something that Braxton expressed to me very early in the season, was that he's like, it was that Washington game where he was getting bull rushed by Montez Sweat. Yeah. He was like, I need to get bigger. I know that. And it's really, really hard. I don't know if people understand how hard it is to put on weight in season because of how many calories you are expending all of the time between practices, between games, all that other stuff. You lose weight during the season. Most players do, especially the big guys. It takes a lot to keep them at the weight that they're at because very few people are inherently that big. So the off season will be a chance for him to kind of bulk up and, work on his body. Like Ryan Poles said, I hope that doesn't come at the expense of any of his athleticism, like you were saying, because he does, and you need that out of your left tackle. But if he can put it all together, I mean, that will be one of the biggest hits that Ryan Poles had. I mean, to get a bona fide starting left tackle out of Southern Utah in the 5th round.
Yeah.
Sure. That's a testament to his evaluation.
I mean, you're going to be athletic. I mean, he's still going to have that athleticism. You don't want to get too, like you said, like, I don't think that there's a danger. I think that the way that the weight training has gone over the last 20, 30 years, that these guys can put on weight. He can show up looking like Dave Bautista and then still go out there and dominate. So, and by the way, I know that he was dominant. I know he was pushed around by Montez Sweat. A lot of guys do. Like, a lot of guys have gone through these growing pains. And I made the mistake because I'm an idiot. I was like, hey, because like, I just see these comments on Twitter and I can't help myself. And people are like, well, there's nothing like, like who's ever gone from getting bullied as a rookie to dominating in the NFL? And I'm like, well, Larry Allen did it. And he's like, well, and then I'm like, if you're going to be the person who's like, outside of all the times that it's happened, when has it ever happened? Then you can't have a thing. And I'm not saying that Braxton Jones is going to be Larry Allen, but if he can be a quality offensive lineman, then I think that's good. Like that, when your 5th round draft pick is starting, I don't think he missed the game. Just get stronger. That's it. Just go out there, hit the free weights, do some yoga. Like, you'll be fine.
And they deserve a lot of credit with what they were able to do in the run game. I mean, they didn't grade out this line as a whole did not grade out bad as for run blocking. There it is. No. Run blocking grades. When the pass protection came in, that is when kind of things broke down. They weren't obviously able to hold a pocket. A lot of that, though, has to do with continuity and knowing, where you have maybe a little bit of weakness and how you account for guys that you're playing next to and stuff like that. If you don't have any continuity with the guys you're playing next to, you don't know how to adjust. And that comes into play very heavily in pass protection. And so that was their downfall. That's where they need to get better. Obviously, these guys know that. And that will come with getting stronger. That will come with more continuity. But I do think that they need 2 or 3 players. Yeah.
Well, and it's one of those things, too, because, and I don't want to say that Lucas Patrick would have saved the season.
Yeah.
But everybody likes to say what they're going to say about Sam Mustipher, which is fine. Say, compared to other NFL players, he might not be on par with them. But to say like he was the best, it wasn't like Ryan Poles went into the season with the idea that Sam Mustipher was going to be the starting center.
Right.
Sam Mustipher was supposed to be a depth piece to provide, hey, in case somebody gets dinged up, he's got to step in. He wasn't supposed to start 17 games. No. And I really do believe that if Lucas Patrick, and I'm not saying that he's Alex Mack or somebody like that, but if he was there the whole season and you talk about the continuity, the offensive line would have looked a little bit different. It would have played out a little bit better. When guys got dinged up, it's fine. If Sam has to play, if Mustipher has to play a little bit, that's fine. We just never went into this year in August thinking, well, Mustipher is, I know that Lucas Patrick got hurt in August, but I'm saying July. They never said that they never counted on him to be the starter, and he was forced into that position. So, and again, when people come in and they talk poorly about him, and they want to understand you're talking about the backup. He was the backup. He was not when people talk about Ryan Poles not being able to evaluate offensive talent and pointing to Sam Mustipher, it's like he was put into that position because of injuries. And if all things have been, and I know health is not guaranteed for any team, but at the same time, you didn't get you barely got maybe a game out of Lucas Patrick because he was never fully healthy, and
you only got,
and he never got to play center.
I think you think you got 20 snaps out of him at center.
Yeah.
No, and that was the thing too. I think that you need an anchor in the middle at center, and whether that's Lucas Patrick, whether that's somebody else, you need a guy that is going to hold down that line, that is also going to get a really good rapport with Justin Fields, because the center quarterback relationship is so crucial to a developing young quarterback. That's why I've talked a little bit about wanting maybe a veteran center that came in that has experience, that can make those checks and show Justin what he's talking about, and what he sees rather, and maybe kind of take some of that stuff off Justin's plate so that he can focus on other things. That's very crucial when you have a veteran quarterback, you have the luxury of kind of developing a center that doesn't need to take on all this responsibility. But when you have a young quarterback, I feel like to anchor a line, again, a young line as it is, I would get a veteran in there. And the thing is, you can pay. You have money to pay for a veteran center, to trade for a veteran center, regardless as to who this year's free agent class is. And it's not going to come cheap, but there's a reason these guys aren't cheap. It's because they make a big difference.
Because it's worth it. Yeah. That's why I pay all the money for floor seats, because it's worth it. I will say this. That's exactly what Ryan Poles did last year, though. If you want to look at, because I know I've seen everybody's mock drafts, and there's a lot of good center prospects coming in through the draft. It's don't draft a center. Do it. And Ryan Poles has already shown last year how much he values the position by going out and making Lucas Patrick one of his first signings. Obviously, it didn't work out because of injuries, but he's going back after it again. Mm-hmm. And I think it was you and I who talked about Lucas Patrick might not be here next year. And if he is, and if you signed another center, okay, well, one of you's kicking over to guard, and that might not be great news for Cody Whitehair. But at the same time, you know what? There's got to be some changes made. And I do. Hit me the name. I'm sorry. Why am I blanking on the Northwestern guy? Your guy again?
Peter Skronsky.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that. The double trade down scenario. If somehow the Bears ended at 7, I think that he would be available there, and I'd be very happy to take him. I think that would be double trade down. I know that everybody's going to talk about defense, but I think a lot of our free agent capital is coming at the defensive line position. I just think that if we look at what happened last season, Larry Ogunjobi was the first guy that he was signed. We're going to jump at the defensive line, and there's a lot of guys. I don't think that Payne's going to make it to free agency or anything like that, but there's going to be a lot of depth pieces added on the defensive line, and then a center, and then a lot of the other stuff is going to come through the draft. And somebody's probably going to ask about this. All right, let's take a question, Sam. If we got some questions, I don't want to keep people waiting, because I guess we could be. Is it too much to ask for the Colts 4th round pick Nelson and Buckner for the number 1? Is that too much or too little? I don't have the Jimmy Johnson evaluation.
The trade value, sure. Yeah.
To me, that sounds cool. Okay. I see on Twitter, people I don't know about Buckner. You're what don't you know about Buckner that you would not welcome him to this team? And I think that Quentin Nelson, despite the poor season for the Indianapolis Colts, as a hypothetical, I'm sure that we're missing. I don't want to be Mike Tannenbaum here and start throwing out ridiculousness, but what would you think about something that included those 3 assets?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a precedent where you've traded multiple veterans, multiple players, along with draft capital in a draft trade. Sometimes you'll get a player, but I struggle to remember the last time that you got it, especially, Buckner was a 1st round pick, right?
Yeah.
Because Quentin Nelson was too. So I'm I don't know if you can, and as much as I love Quentin Nelson, either you're going to make him kick over to left guard, or you're going to make Tevin Jenkins go over to left guard because Nelson plays right. Yeah, but that's one thing though, that you do need a bona fide 3 tech, and in this defense, that's a staple of a Matt Eberflus defense is the 3-tech and the nickel corner, the will linebacker.
Yeah.
And they already have their nickel and Kyler Gordon, but you need that 3-tech up front. And that's another, like, in the way that I was talking about a veteran center coming in because of the experience, because he can anchor that line. I also think that you maybe do bring in a veteran 3-tech. Again, whether that's by trade, whether that's whatever. But yeah, I mean, a pick like that or a trade like that, I mean, you'd have to be very sure that both of those guys are exactly what you need. And I would opt for more capital, quite honestly. And I think that a lot of GMs are like that because, like, no, I can.
Yeah, because you want more controllable assets and you want younger guys. And it's going to be more of a youth, an infusion of youth. So I would say of all, like, because every time every time somebody brings up the Colts, they always bring up, Michael Pittman or Quentin Nelson or DeForest Buckner. Of the three, I would actually rather have Buckner. I think I like Michael Pittman Jr., don't get me wrong, but I think Buckner just brings like something to the defensive line that they absolutely need. And once they're able to start controlling the defensive line a little bit, I think you'll see a vast improvement. That's why I think it's too quick to call for, Alan Williams to be removed or anything like that. They really didn't get a huge opportunity with everything that happened this season, especially trading away Khalil Mack and Bobby Quinn and everything and Roquan. Like they traded three pretty good guys. So understandably, like, listen, trading those guys probably got us the number one pick. So I'm not going to be too upset about it. So, but let's talk. Actually, since we're talking about that, what about Roquan getting like the highest paid linebacker? Like, I think now that we can look back and be like, look, he wasn't getting that from us. I'm glad he got his deal. I'm glad he's happy in Baltimore. I know my friend Duke was like, see, this is why the Ravens are a well-run organization. And I'm like, all right, slow your roll. I just don't think it was like, it just doesn't make sense for the Bears to pay that kind of money for Roquan Smith.
No, the difference was the guarantees too, right? The Ravens were much more willing to put up more guarantees than the Bears were. And it was kind of surprising, quite honestly. I think that you can kind of safely assume that they're going to use the tag now on Lamar Jackson, but to kind of invest that many resources and that much capital in a guy when you still have to pay your franchise player in Lamar was a little bit interesting to me. But I mean, yeah, that was, and I think that we are seeing that a lot more, and players themselves, obviously Roquan doesn't have an agent, so he was the one advocating for these guarantees. This is what players want. And I think you can even get away, as a team with maybe bringing the overall value down a little bit on these contracts if you're willing to put up most of it in guarantees. And I'm hoping that's kind of the direction that it's trending, because I think these players deserve a lot more guaranteed money than they're getting. I mean, you see that trending in other leagues. And I don't understand why in the most violent of the four major sports in North America that you are not talking more guarantees in these contracts. So that just shows you, I mean, where these players' heads are at. I think that was a microcosm. What Roquan Smith wanted was a microcosm of what is kind of on the brain of a lot of these players, in that I just want to make sure that I get guaranteed money, that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. And then he also wanted to reset the market, which he did, because he's now the first off-ball linebacker to make over $20 million a year. So good for him. But yeah, the Bears weren't going to do that. They've got way too many holes to plug, and they're rebuilding. Yeah. The Ravens are in a completely different situation. So,
and we can be happy for Roquan Smith and not have to talk S about him and be like, you know what? Thank you for your years in Chicago. Hope it goes well for you in Baltimore. I'll be rooting for you this weekend. Maybe not. I kind of like the Bengals, but in any event, like, cool. I'm happy. Listen, I'm happy for Roquan. It doesn't matter. We got a second round pick. That's all good. Do we have another question, by the way, Sammy? Otherwise, would you be willing to trade for D-Hop? Also, is he going to want an extension? That's the one cool thing about, having all that cap space is your ability to sign extensions. I would be willing to take on DeAndre Hopkins, but I'm not giving up a first round or a second round pick for him. Even though that's what you paid for Chase Claypool. I think the D-Hop's a little bit older, and the salary is a little bit, heftier. I look at, I kind of equate it similar to what Amari Cooper went through last year, where Cleveland got him on the cheap because they're willing to pay all that money. There might be a more robust market for DeAndre Hopkins, but for me, I would take him. Like, yeah, but it's like, oh, I'm not. It's like one of those things. Like somebody's like, hey, do you want tickets for Monster Jam? Like, oh yeah, like they're $100. You're like, whoa. So I would take him. Where's your head at with DeAndre Hopkins?
What scares me about this is the reports that are saying that this is the desire of the owner to do this.
Yeah.
And that will be communicated to whoever the new GM ends up being. That scares me because I don't necessarily know that owners have a realistic idea of what a player is worth. And so I don't know if him telling that, the new GM that he wants to trade D-Hop, I don't know if there's also conditions that come with that. Like, okay, but it has to be for this. That scares me, number one. If you could, I would trade a second round pick for D-Hop, because if you look at the player that Kyler Murray was before, like while D-Hop was on suspension, which hopefully there's no more PED mix-ups.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray was a completely different player with D-Hop on the field. Completely. And DeAndre Hopkins, he may be 31 years old, but he is, last I checked, plenty of these guys play into their mid-30s, and he's one of those guys that makes these very sticky-handed, one-handed catches. He can contort his body. He's got incredible body control, and he can make these catches that aren't perfect, from passes that maybe aren't perfect. They're not perfectly placed, but he can adjust himself, given his experience, given his talent, given his athleticism, to make those catches. And, oh, hey, maybe in a developing young quarterback who's still coming into his own as an NFL passer, maybe all of his balls aren't going to be right on the money. Maybe he's not going to be throwing dots and dimes all over the place every single time. And maybe that would be nice to have a veteran in that room that is of D-Hop's caliber. I think that he's still got a lot left to give. So I would give up a second rounder. I'm just kind of scared about the whole situation of the fact that this is coming from an owner. They might not have a really realistic sense of what D-Hop's worth.
Well, the owner,
I wouldn't overpay for him.
You talk about a trade that had veteran players in it. And I know it might not have been multiple veteran players, but when DeAndre Hopkins was traded to the Arizona Cardinals for a second round pick back then, it did include David Johnson, a running back. Mm-hmm. So, the Texans obviously didn't know what you should get for a wide receiver, because they made that move without getting a first round pick, which is absolutely ridiculous.
They also didn't know what they needed to get for JJ.
Oh my God. Yeah, that too.
I don't know how Nick Caserio still has a job. I'm gonna be quite honest.
Why are you still there? Like, why? How is this possible?
Oh, you fired two coaches after 1 year. He has. I'm not gonna speculate.
I'm just surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised.
I shouldn't.
I'll say he should be fired. And there's a lot of things going on. I was on Sportsnet in Canada on Monday night, Tuesday morning, and they were talking about like rank the jobs, because we do a thing called rank them. Like, what are the five job openings right now for head coaches? What's the best? What's the worst? I said the worst one's Houston, because despite the fact that they have the number 2 overall pick, could possibly get the number 1 pick, at worst you have 2 and 12. They still have so many institutional questions that, to me, it's not worth it. Like, it just wouldn't be worth it.
How often have they been picking in the top 5? They've been picking in the top 5 for the last however many years, and nothing's changed, because it's institutional.
There's way too many issues that are going on. And you know what? Like, listen, like Jacksonville has had some top picks recently, but at the same time, they still had a run to the AFC title game not too long ago. They've shown, and I think that the Khan family has shown, through Fulham and AEW, that they know how to run organizations, and I think that they're on the right track now. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I hope the Bears are going to be very similar. If Houston sticks with the status quo, we'll see you next year. Like, for everybody who makes fun of the Bears, you'll be 4-13. I'm like, we're not. No, that's not happening. And I had even said this in my little diatribe about what the Bears have. And I said, look, they're 1-7 in 1-score games this season. And somebody was like, I don't think that's as good as you think it is. I'm like, with a roster this bad, that we were in so many 1-score games, and there were some non-1-score games that should have been considered 1-score games. And I think of I think one of the Minnesota games, one of the Packer games, where I'm like, all you got to do, look what the Vikings did this year. They flipped the script on those 1-score games, Now, I'm not saying they're going to go 11-0. Like, it's not like we're going to go 10-0 in one-score games next season. But you flip the script a little bit. And again, I think that what Jacksonville did this year, what the Lions did this year, it's a blueprint. And the Eagles the year before, like we're a couple of years off of the Eagles, but like this is the progressions that we're trying to be making. And so I guess I would. I'm considering that we're hopefully going to get a boatload of picks moving down multiple times. Surrendering a second round pick is not going to be that big a deal. And speaking of second round picks that we have surrendered for a wide receiver, I think it now is the point to, and we won't play the clip just yet. But I'm going to talk about Chase Claypool for a moment. And I swear to great Caesar's ghost himself, if I see one more person go out there and be like, well, the Bears basically traded a first. No. You know what they did? They traded a second round pick for Chase Claypool. It's not essentially a first round pick, because what that would mean is that when the Steelers pick, they're picking that on Thursday night, and that player is getting a 5-year contract, which is not the case. That player, that 32nd pick, is going to be Friday night. It'll lead off the contest. We'll have to sit there and wear it and be like, yeah, we'll sit there and watch the 4 highlights from Chase Claypool, and okay, the Steelers are the greatest organization in the world, whatever. But at the same time, it's a second round pick. And to me, I look at, because, we weren't bringing back Roquan Smith anyways. What we basically did was trade down in the draft. We got the Ravens pick. We gave up our pick. We were going to lose Roquan anyways, and we got Chase Claypool, which to me ends up being all right. And that's something that was asked of Ryan Poles today. And let's hear what he had to say on the Chase Claypool situation.
That's a good point. I think that's the difference between like trades in baseball and basketball. It's like plug and play. There's an entire offseason and half of a season of installs and all the things that you need to do collectively to play and execute offensive play. On top of that, it was a little bit choppy with Justin getting dinged up. He got dinged up. So it was a little bit choppy of a start. I told Chase, and we had a really good conversation, I'm not blinking at that one at all. I think he's going to help us moving forward, and I'm excited about it.
Carmen, where do you stand on the Chase Claypool trade a few months later?
Yeah, I don't really know what the expectations were of a lot of these people that are like, that was a terrible trade. I'm like, we don't know what that trade even was yet. Because at the point that Chase Claypool came into the season, again, you're still trying to figure out that the Bears had the least amount of passing yards because they had the least amount of passing attempts in the league. Like, there's not a lot of targets to go around, and he's coming into a brand new system where, and Ryan Poles said it, it's not plug and play in the NFL. You don't know these guys. You don't know the system. It's drastically different from what you were operating in Pittsburgh. So we don't know what this trade has turned into yet. And I love the fact that he's talking about Justin and I are going to work together in the offseason with the rest of the receivers. We're going to put in all the, we're going to have the benefit of a full offseason program, and we'll come in next year, second year in the system, ready to go with him being more familiar. I mean, that's not even the amount of time that Chase Claypool was there, especially given that he was hurt, Justin was hurt. That's not enough time to even learn the terminology in the playbook. You need more time. So we can't rush to judgment on Chase. I don't think he's a number 1 receiver. I will fully say that and endorse that. I don't see him as the number 1 guy. I still think that the Bears need a bona fide number 1 guy, which is why D-Hop is a little bit intriguing. But as the second or third receiver with Darnell Mooney back healthy next year, I like Chase Claypool, and I think that, like you said, it was really just trading down in the second round to get him. I think that was worth it at this point. But again, I think it's an incomplete grade at this. You don't know what that's going to become, and from what we saw of him this season, I don't think that's a fair representation of what kind of player he can be.
Absolutely agree, and it struck me today watching our friend Kay Adams on the Up and Adams show on FanDuel TV. She was talking about everybody who had an opinion on the amount of money that the Jacksonville Jaguars threw at Christian Kirk, which I kind of took that personal because I'm like, yeah, I was one of those guys. I really was. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I was like, you think about it. You think of like all the receivers who were moving around last year. Christian Kirk did not strike you as one when you think about Devontae Adams and some of the other players who have moved just over the past couple of years. Like that wasn't the game changer, but he was making all this money that forced all these other deals.
So I was going to say, he reset the market. And then a really good point she made was that he's now the 18th highest paid receiver. So, like, he may have reset the market, but there are now 17 other receivers that have benefited from that. So, like, in the end of the day, Jacksonville kind of got him on the cheap, especially 100%. For what he did this season.
Yeah. And so when she was saying that, I thought to myself, so she told everybody who was still upset about that to shut up. And I told her via tweet, I said, they've moved on to, you gave up a first round pick for Chase Claypool. That's going to be the new one. And I'll be honest with you, if it works out the same way for us as it did for Jacksonville, then again, this will be one of those things that hopefully next season, at the end of the year, Kay Adams will be like, hey, for all of you people who are knocking the Bears for giving up the 32nd pick in the draft to the Steelers for Chase Claypool, you can shut up now because he's gone out there and been pretty good. And if you think about a receivers room that has a combination of Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, and let's just say, if we're just throwing out veteran names, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, somebody like that to go into I'm sorry, I know it's too close. I know it's too close to you.
No, I would love to see them in Chicago.
I know, you'd love to see them. I would, you know what? But it's like, okay, that's a receivers room. Like, okay, now all of a sudden, when you think of it in the context of like, if they get in, and they'll probably end up drafting a guy as well who could end up being like a Christian Watson type maybe as well. Like the receiver room could be vastly improved. I don't think it's going to take that much work to get it done. It'll end up looking like a fantasy football wide receiver room. And speaking of fantasy football, the fantasy football season is not over. And the best way to continue to play fantasy football is to go to underdogfantasy.com, sign up, or even better, go to download the app, the Underdog Fantasy app. Go to your app store or whatever you do. Download the Underdog Fantasy app. You can go there right now. And you're like, listen, I'm going to play this. There's so many contests that you can play here in the playoffs. So many things that you can do with the Underdog Fantasy app that I implore you to go there right now, download it, and Underdog Fantasy is going to match your initial deposit up to $100, which means if you go in there, you deposit $100. Underdog Fantasy will give you $100. If you do 25, you're going to end up getting 25. Don't try to pull a fast one. They're not suckers. Okay. But go to underdogfantasy.com and do that right now. Get the app. By the way, I was at the gym today and the Underdog Fantasy app notified me that the Ravens had signed somebody. I thought it was like, oh, they signed Lamar Jackson. Like, thank God. I'm like, it's Roquan. Whatever. But it did. So the app it's a newsbreaker and it allows you to play fantasy games, and the fantasy playoffs, the playoff season. I know a lot of people just associate, fantasy football ending week 17, but there is so much going on. And not only that, once the draft comes around, there's going to be so many contests that you're going to want to be involved with. So go to underdogfantasy.com, download the app, go explore and see what they got to, because it's the best app out there. I know that everybody's like, oh, I like this one. No. Underdog Fantasy is where you want to play your fantasy sports. So that was my diatribe, though, as well on Chase Claypool, because that's been upsetting me a little bit. One thing that we did see, going back, let's backtrack a little bit, talking about Justin Fields and his leadership. We saw a video that's been circulating around where Justin Fields made sure to give David Montgomery a hug after the final game. What does this mean? Are we not going to see David Montgomery? What is your gut feel with David Montgomery and his situation with the Chicago Bears?
Don't make me speculate on if guys are coming back to teams. I've had to do enough.
You got it.
Being up in Green Bay. Brian Poles said it perfectly today. He said, I'm a big David Montgomery fan. And it sounds like from everything Poles was saying that he is an integral part of this offense and will continue to be. I mean, he talked very much about how there was an offensive identity that was established by the Bears this season. The foundation was laid for it. And it includes a very, very good run game. And David Montgomery was a huge part of that. So I think that if you want to continue that and continue building on the foundation that you've already started, then you re-sign David Montgomery. But I don't know what, David Montgomery wants as far as contracts go. I don't know. I mean, the Bears have all of the money in the world to make it happen. So I would expect David Montgomery to be back. I would be really surprised that's famous last words, but I would be very surprised if he ends up not in blue and orange next year.
I feel the same way. And it's one of those things too, that when you look at the running backs, the running back market, there's a lot of guys hitting free agency this season, including Saquon Barkley, including Josh Jacobs, who had the best season of his career. I know a lot of people, I see people online saying like the Bears should draft Josh Jacobs. And I'm like, why would you listen, Josh Jacobs had a great season for the Raiders this year in his contract year, but David Montgomery, I think I won't concede. I'm not going to concede that Josh Jacobs is better than David Montgomery. David Montgomery's been in this system, and I would just like to see him benefit. And I'm talking about David Montgomery, benefit from a better offensive line, getting another year with Justin Fields. I think that's our guy. And I want him to come back, and I want him to be a member of the Chicago Bears. So I hope that works out as well. That's my sincerest hope. When I go on the Tape Never Lies Network tomorrow, I know Draft Dr. Phil is one of the guys who's been a bigger David Montgomery fan than me. And because I go back with him, I loved him at Iowa State. And this was back, when my children were smaller and I could watch a Saturday morning college football game, and I would sit there with my daughter. She was kind of a newborn, or she was a little tiny, 1 or 2. He was still playing at Iowa State. And it was so much fun because they play the 9 a.m. games here on the West Coast. So that was always enjoyable. So I've always been a big fan of his. I hope he's going to be back. Sammy, how about some questions, though? I feel like we've been neglecting, but I think we're hitting all the subjects. All right. Lovie Smith, I don't think is going to be our defensive coordinator unless they fired Alan Williams today and I missed it. I'm still in on Alan Williams. I know that Ryan Poles or Matt Eberflus was also very so Eberflus-esque to be like, we'll see. We'll evaluate. Okay, we got it. You'll evaluate it. Upper body injuries, whatever. Whatever you got to do, Matt. It's fine. I don't think that you could get a fair evaluation on Alan Williams. I know a lot of people are like, he wasn't aggressive enough. It's like, well, what he was working with. I would, though. I mean, if you were to be agreeable, I would love to see, when they give those kind of assistant to the assistant type of things, having I'd love to have Lovie on the
defensive
snap.
Analyst.
Yes, that's it.
Defensive analyst position. Those exist. That was what Lovie was when in Houston before they hired him as a head coach.
Oh yeah, he wasn't the defensive coordinator, was he?
No, he wasn't. He was a defensive analyst or senior advisor. One of those titles.
Yeah, consultant, whatever.
Yeah. So you're not going to replace Alan Williams at this point. Again, especially when you have a defensive head coach and you have a DC that works under that defensive head coach and kind of, again, trickles down the system to the players. That's not something that you're going to, granted, I think the systems are pretty similar, but you can add him as an advisor, but you're not going to put him in charge of the defense at this point. Alan Williams has earned another year of figuring it out with more pieces because there was subtraction. There was a net subtraction from the defense this year. So you got to give him more of a chance.
No. And I thought that, given he got a little bit more aggressive as the year went on, but I think given with what he was working with, dude, you can only do so much.
You don't have the space, the more athletic kind of guys that can penetrate the pocket on the interior of that defensive line, which is again so important in this defense. The edge rushers, you didn't have a really solid rotation on the outside, especially with when Robert Quinn left, and then you didn't have any supplemental stuff from the linebackers, and you're still trying to figure out. You got Jack Sanborn, that was a pleasant surprise, but you really don't know how that middle level is going to shake out going forward. I don't think any of those guys are safe, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it's Jack Sanborn season. I think, and we'll throw this to Luke Getsy as well. I think he's going to have an opportunity to go and grow in his position as well. And again, we've echoed this plenty of times on this program. Everybody's learning. Everybody's getting better. Everybody's getting better at doing things. Matt Eberflus is going to be better at doing things as well. It's their first year coaches, their first year in their spots. Everybody's learning on the job. And I thought he did a great job. I thought that Eberflus, and by the way, I thought it was a master class of everybody. We all want the Bears to lose. on like we do and we don't. Like I wanted, like ultimately, like if the Bears would have, I don't know. I wanted Bayless to do well, and he did. It was perfect. So, but I love that Eberflus was out there complaining about the field goal at the end of the first half. Like, oh, okay, like this is our guy right here. Like don't go out there and act like you're tanking, but yes, sir. Like go out there and you show. I love everything that I've seen out of Eberflus. Could he be better? Yeah. Like everybody's in a position where like you're 3-14. Like everybody could do better. Wait, 3-15?
There is plenty of blame to go around. It's never just one thing when you're 3-14. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, he's a first-time head coach. He's also got Luke Getsy, who's a first-time play caller. And you need that. There's growing pains associated with the coaching staff as well. Like it's not just players when they're rookies and they're coming in. Like that's also a thing with coaches. Is if it's your first time doing something, you might not do it the best the first time around, but you're gonna learn and you're gonna get better. So give them the chance.
Totally, give them an opportunity, and there's gonna be a lot of growing during the off season. Do we have another question though, Sam? There is something I wanted. What would it take for you to get? What would it take for you to give up the number 1 pick? Again, I don't have the Jimmy Johnson thing. My dream is having Houston give up both of their first round picks. That's the dream, is that hopefully Bryce Young establishes himself as
sway them
number 1 guy that it's like, and be like, look, the Colts are going to give us 4. They're going to give us DeForest Buckner. You give us your 2 first round picks and whatever else the trade calculator says. I think that's the dream. And then we trade down again. Trade down multiple
I would love to double. I'm team trade down all the way. I do think that you need to pick up an extra first round pick. Like, not only do you trade back, but you also pick up another first round pick. Yeah, either be it this year, be it next year, you're going to need another first rounder to make me think that that's worth it. And I don't care how many spots I'm moving down, even if it's only like 2.
Yeah, the one thing that concerns me is that the South is so brutal that team could end up being good, because it's like, because you want a first round pick for next year and you want to be in the situation like the Eagles are in, or like how Detroit was this year, where they had the Rams pick and the Rams were so miserable. And
they're getting
oh man, Detroit, man, turning it into a model organization. I know that I love to make fun of them. I do love it too, because like the cool thing about Detroit is like they're good. Like they've got a lot of good things and a lot of things to be, excited about. But Jared Goff is your quarterback, and we're like the exact opposite. Like we got nothing, but we got Justin Fields. Like, which position would you rather be in?
Hey, I've spent a lot of time now talking about how I'm not convinced that Jared Goff is not their quarterback next year. I don't think that precludes them from taking a quarterback, but now you can pull a whole Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes thing, because Jared Goff had like the 3rd best season of his career this year in the regular season.
100%. You know what? They've been making so many great moves over the last couple of years. And I think that, even if they don't use a first round pick on a quarterback, they're in a situation where they could draft like a Sam Howell type guy who's like a prospect, a Desmond Ridder, somebody like that you're like, okay, he's not going to play this season, maybe a little bit better. Or maybe they take a wild swing on Will Levis because they do have that extra draft capital. They're in a very interesting position. And it's funny when people look back at the teams that passed on Justin Fields. I went back and looked at my article from that draft, and I suggested that the Lions take Justin Fields for that coming into that draft. I'm like, if I was the Lions, I would actually take Justin Fields. I don't know why they're not considering this. And of course they went with Sewell, who's turned out to be a really good player. Like he's been a solid, good NFL player. Baldy did a nice thing. Yeah. You know what? Yeah. Like he's a good player. Like he is like, that wasn't and I saw somebody who was doing the hindsight of like, this is what the team's passed on. And I thought that person could have been like, Detroit's still, like, all things being considered, like, would you rather have Justin Fields and Penny Sewell right now? Like, I don't know. But they're very effusive in the praise and saying, like, you know what? Goff's playing well enough for them. He's gotten to a Super Bowl before, so why not? Why not continue to roll with Jared Goff until it's like if you drive a Honda Accord, like, it's not the flashiest car, but like, okay, it's not going to break down on the road to go into Vegas. So let's
I
just
used to
keep
drive a
going.
Honda Accord, and I used to drive it.
Of course you did.
No, and also, like, I mean, there's something to be said too about the situation that Goff is in Detroit. I mean, we're watching now in real time what the league thinks of Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator in Detroit. He's got, I think, 3 head coaching interviews. So that's 3 of the 5 open positions are now interested. Aaron Glenn has even gotten called. Dan Campbell's staff is really getting noticed, and I think that it's warranted given what the Lions were able to do, and especially what they were able to do in Lambeau on Sunday. I can't say enough about what it takes and the buy-in you have to have from your players to not have anything to play for, and then just be like, yeah, but I want to punch them in the mouth anyway. If we're not going to the playoffs, they're not going either.
Yeah, but what if that person that's but it's also Aaron Rodgers, and he's such a smug a-hole, and he was like, "Oh, we're not going to lose to the Lions." Like he was
can't lose to that team 3 times.
Losing that team, and he was even pointing out Minnesota and Detroit, like, well, like we have 2 dome teams coming. Like the NFL tried their hardest. I think it's Mike North, not that Mike North, but a different Mike North, who puts together the schedule. Oh, it's noticeable that you had 2 dome teams ending the season at Lambeau. Like, of course they did.
Like, that doesn't mean anything anymore. You look at the Packers, they have lost on that field. Yeah. Their season has ended on that field the last 3 years. And it started in 2020 with the Buccaneers coming in as a wild card team, beating them. San Francisco beating them in the playoffs. And now the Lions.
Now the Lions.
Or whether in dome teams, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Well, when you've got Aaron Rodgers, it doesn't matter because that guy sucks. No, he doesn't suck. He's better than me. If we were playing flag football down here at Huntington Beach, I would let him be the quarterback. Do you think that we've seen, I know that you hate already speculating on this, and this is what you're going to be writing about for the next 3 months. He's not holding the team hostage, but I don't know. I don't know if Liam Neeson's coming in there to force the issue. He's done, right? He can't go on.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know. I think he's done with the Packers. I don't know if he's done overall. I don't know. I mean, like, he said so many conflicting things and so many, like he talked about Christian Watson, like in the height of Christian Watson, scoring 8 touchdowns in 7 games, whatever it was. He talked about how Christian Watson is like the type of player you come back for. Mm-hmm. And then he turns around at the end of everything and is like, well, and like he talks about how young the team is, and it almost feels like he kind of looks at it like the team is passing him by.
Yeah.
And I do think that there is a delusion in Green Bay of how far away they actually are versus how far away the brass and like Aaron Rodgers thinks they are. Because Rodgers said it. He said, we're like a player or 2 away. I'm like, you're not a player or 2 away.
Are you?
You're not.
Who are the players?
Right. Like
they're Tom Brady away from the Super Bowl.
Right. Like that's just not the case at this point. Like you've got a lot of good production out of your young receivers at the end of the day. And you add to that room. You have to add to that room because then you've got guys like Randall Cobb that are, I don't know if they're going to keep playing. Like I asked Matt Eberflus about it, or not Matt Eberflus, Matt LaFleur after the game about the state of the wide receiver room now, looking back on it, and is that enough going forward? And I mean, he still brought up names like Samori Toure and all that other stuff, and I'm like,
yeah, good luck with that.
Are we really putting
yeah.
And like Jordan, you got the running game, you need help on the offensive line. I mean, as good as David Bakhtiari is, like he's not reliable anymore, and it breaks my heart because I love watching him play.
Yeah,
but he's the best ability is availability, and he doesn't have that.
He doesnn have it, and it's
that's.
I look
and
at
like
that.
Yosh Nijman. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson had his way with Yosh Nijman last night, so much so that Yosh Nijman got Sunday night and got benched. So they brought in Zach Tom at right tackle because he has tackle flexibility, and they brought him in, and he fared marginally better, but not much. So like there's a lot of places that I feel like you still need. And then like, I don't know what's going on with the defense. You got aging safeties. But in the front 7, you've got multiple first-round picks that just can't put it together. Hopefully with Sean Gary getting back, but I'm getting off on a tangent about Green Bay. I don't know.
It's fine. No, it's fine because we're making fun of Green Bay because they're terrible. And
I don't think they're but I don't think they're a couple players away.
They're not like, well, and honestly, like if Kawhi Walker plays next season, I'll be shocked.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, I got real killed this week on so like if I found the video of him walking off the field and appearing to say I didn't do anything, like he's like throwing a temper tantrum in the tunnel.
Oh, I saw
after he's the one that got himself kicked out of the game for shoving a trainer trying to attend to an injured player, especially this week of all weeks. Not to mention, it was his second time doing this. He shoved a coach in the Bills game who was trying to help him up. Like, I get that this is an emotional game, and I'm not faulting anybody for showing emotion. And like, if he was legitimately mad at himself showing emotion, that's fine. But like, you brought this on yourself. This is the second time you've done it. You can't be so out of control of your emotions that you do things like this that hurts your team. And then like, see, like I just couldn't believe like how many like people were literally like in my DMs, like, you don't know what it's like, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I'm not faulting him for showing emotion. I'm faulting him for whining like a little baby that he didn't do anything when he did something. He did something terrible and inexcusable and completely Bush League. So I was, oh God, I got killed on Twitter. And I'm like, why are we all coming to the defense of someone who shot a trainer?
Why are you getting killed? I saw that. I'm like, what is wrong with people?
I don't know. You can't say anything on Twitter. And I'm very much like, I think 4, 5, 6 times before I express any sort of opinion on Twitter, because I'm just like, somebody's going to take it the wrong way. And I'm like, I wasn't mad that he's showing emotion. I will never fault anyone for showing emotion. I appreciate that this is an emotional game, and I want guys to show emotion. I think men should express their emotions more. But I don't want to see a temper tantrum after you did something bad. It's like, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the issue here. That's why it was a bad look of the whole situation. It was a bad look that he threw a temper tantrum, and a bad look that he shoved a trainer.
Yes.
It's insane.
All the way around. Bad looks out of Green Bay. Oh, I can't say that I'm bummed about it. I mean, I'm upset as a human being that he did what he did to the trainer, but it's at the same time, like that organization, they're in for a rude awakening over the next couple of years, because I truly do believe that it's going to be the Bears and the Lions over the next couple of seasons who are going to be dominating. The Vikings.
You can't count out the Vikings either.
I'm counting them out. Nope, they're counting them out.
No, they're a good organization. They've got
a
lot of good pieces.
They're fine. They'll have years like this where they bubble up and everything breaks right for them, and then they're still the Vikings. Like, I'm not even convinced they're going to beat the Giants this week. They probably will, but I'm not like, oh, that's an automatic win.
I really appreciate the culture that Kevin O'Connell has instilled up there. I think there's a lot to be said about that, and that's the reason Kirk Cousins talks about it all the time. This is the most supported he's ever felt, and this is just this team sticks together. And honestly, I do think they're dangerous because they've been down by 33 at halftime and come back. I know they shouldn't have had to come back. I know it was the Colts, but like, if you have that in the back of your head, like, we came back from down 33 points. We can do anything.
That's what they kept trying to tell us on Monday night when TCU went down 30.
Did you see Patrick Peterson? I thought that was so funny.
They're like, hey, like TCU's come back from a bigger deficit than this. You're like, yeah, against Oklahoma State. Like, can it? Like, it's
Patrick Peterson was like, it's okay, TCU. All you need is 5 more touchdowns, or like 5 touchdowns. And that's what he legitimately said, though, in the locker room of that Colts game, was he said, all we need is 5 touchdowns. Yeah. And lo and behold, it happened. I thought that was funny. I thought Patrick Peterson. I love
Pat Pete. Don't get me wrong. I love him. I'm a huge fan of his coming out.
I think you're going to have to. You're in for a rude awakening about the Vikings. I like them a lot.
You know what? I'm not, because they've never been tested. I mean, outside of that game, like, I guess every time outside of the times they've been tested, they haven't been tested. All right, that's fair.
Who is talking about?
Okay, I will just tell you
about other than the other times that it's happened.
They've had a very successful season.
Yes.
I want to see them where they've had sustained. Well, they didn't have a lot of rain. We'll see. Let's just see if they can sustain it. I have my doubts.
All right, fair enough.
I've seen the Chris.
I don't know that I can trust them wholly either. So I talked about that today.
I like Cousins. Like, Kirk Cousins is fine. Like, he's like
Justin Jefferson. I voted for him for Offensive Player of the Year.
If you're watching the Royal Rumble and they announce Kirk Cousins, you're like, you pop for him, you like him, but you're like, he's not winning the Royal Rumble. You know, he's not that kind of presence. He's not a main eventer. He's an upper mid-card guy, but he's not a main eventer. Justin Fields walks down
the second best season of his career.
I know. And it's not going to, it might lead them to one playoff win because they're playing the Giants. We'll see what happens when they have to play the Eagles or the 49ers. Mm-hmm. If he beats them, then I'll be, and I think that I've earned the right. I've seen enough out of Kirk Cousins. Because like of all the guys, like Jared Goff would be the one that would be like, okay, I got to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's been to a Super Bowl. Out of all these quarterbacks in the NFC playoffs, there's two who've been to a Super Bowl, and it's Tom Brady and Jared Goff. Right?
Well, Jared Goff isn't in them, so yeah, it's Tom Brady and
he's not even in it. Yeah,
he's not even in it. So
I'm sorry, I just keep thinking that. I keep thinking the Lions
because the Lions wanted they're in it. Yeah, no.
Better than like they're no disrespect to the Vikings. I would fear the Lions more right now than I would fear.
Oh, I would too. Again, because of like
the Cowboys
what they were able to do at Lambeau. I think that was just incredible. It was incredible. Right?
That
it was
you know
awesome.
What? There's the case study right there of like the Vikings still were in the mix for the number 1 overall seed. Those two teams exemplified where those franchises truly are by the way they performed at Green Bay. That's my thesis statement. All right. Now we're way off on a tangent, but listen, this has been a lot of fun. And this is why this is going to continue because we haven't even started to do mock drafts. Like we're still new into this.
Oh, I did my first one today.
Oh,
first one of mine came out today on foxsports.com if you want to check it out.
Please do.
I did it with David Hellman, who is another Fox Sports insider. He usually covers the Cowboys. He's also on Speak on FS1. So him and I did a mock draft for the first time. Our first crack at it.
If I was a professional, I would have had that available and ready for us. But are you going to do one every week, or is this will this?
No, not every week. I think the next time we'll do one is going to be when the season is actually over. I think this was our just first mock of the regular season's over. You know, we jumped the gun a little bit on that, but I don't think we're going to do another one until the season's done.
Well, then let's just pretend I knew that. And then next week, we're going to go over Carmen's mock draft that she did for foxsports.com. Go check it out right now. That's your homework assignment, everybody. Go check out Carmen's mock draft on foxsports.com. We will reconvene next week and make fun of her for it.
Yep.
Not as much. And those are the handles right there at Adam Rank on Twitter and TikTok, not Instagram. I'm at Adam Rank NFL on Instagram and Carmi V all over the place. Instagram. Are you on TikTok?
I am. I think I'm TikTok Carmi V, but I'm Carmi V on Instagram and Twitter. So.
Oh, awesome. That's the dream. But in any event, thank you so much for being here. I won't put you on the spot for any final words, but we do thank everybody who has been coming by through the entirety of the season, stopping by, asking questions. We appreciate all of them. You know, we went a little overtime today, but that's cool because there was a lot to talk about. But next week, we'll start diving into some of the mock drafts. I might even do one myself. We'll see what I'll save it. We got to spread this out. So we're going to take Carmen to task next week on her mock draft, and maybe there'll be some more Bears news, and we'll make fun of teams we'll make fun of the Vikings for losing at home to the Giants. It'll be our riot. So we'll see you.
I'll be there.
Yeah, there you go. We'll have fun. We'll look forward to that. Until next week, everybody, bear down.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. Brought to you by Underdog Fantasy.